The Millionaire's twins didn't know what it was like to walk until he caught the nanny doing something impossible. Before today's story begins, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy love stories, make sure to subscribe to the channel. That way, you help this work grow and motivate me to bring even more stories to you. Seattle was covered by a heavy gray sky, the kind of afternoon where the rain seemed endless. The Callahan mansion, surrounded by tall iron gates and a perfectly manicured garden, rose like a monument of glass and steel atop a hill. Its modern architecture reflected a calculated luxury with straight lines and glass walls that revealed an interior as flawless as it was cold. Inside, the hallways were wide and silent, with polished dark wood floors that echoed every step. Contemporary art adorned the walls, but there were no recent family portraits, only old photographs, strategically placed like artifacts in a private museum. On the upper floor, behind a large glass wall overlooking the rainy city, was Andrew Callahan's office. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. His light brown hair slicked back with precision, he stood silently, staring out at the gray horizon. His light blue eyes, once vibrant, now carried a constant heaviness. Since the death of Rachel, his wife, in a boating accident on Lake Washington, Andrew had built an invisible wall between himself and the world. Work, meetings, and numbers were his trenches. Affection and vulnerability, threats to be avoided. The mansion, though filled with everything money could buy, lacked something essential: life. There were no conversations, no music, just the distant sound of rain and occasionally the soft footsteps of the housekeeper, Mrs. Whitaker, a middle-aged woman with reserved gestures and a watchful gaze who knew every silence in that house. That afternoon, the silence was broken by a timid sound, almost lost, the muffled laughter of two children. Andrew turned away from the city and let the sound guide him. He descended the wide staircase with its steel and wood railing, passing black and white portraits that spoke of lighter days. One in particular always made him pause: he and Rachel. Smiling, the twins still babies in their arms, a frozen moment from before everything changed. In the main room, he found Liam and Grace sitting on a soft rug, surrounded by expensive toys that looked barely used. Liam, his straight blonde hair falling over his forehead, held a metal toy car, moving it slowly, without enthusiasm. Grace, with golden curls, kept her wide, bright eyes fixed on a hardcover book, though she seemed distant, as if flipping through it out of habit. Neither of them was standing, something Andrew had grown painfully used to seeing. He approached and crouched down in front of them. "Want to try today?" he asked, holding out his hands with a faint smile, more an attempt than a true hope. Liam looked away and shrugged, while Grace hugged her teddy bear tightly, pressing her face into it like a shield. Andrew sighed and sat back on the couch. Mrs. Whitaker entered quietly, carrying a tray of tea. "They barely touched their lunch, Mr. Callahan, and they're getting quieter." Andrew ran a hand over his face, exhaling slowly. "I know, but we can't force them. We've done everything the doctors recommended." The housekeeper hesitated, then said gently, "Maybe it's not just about doctors. Maybe they need something different." He raised a hand, cutting her off before she could continue. "I don't need parenting advice." When Mrs. Whitaker left, silence returned to the room. Andrew looked again at the twins and felt the familiar weight of helplessness. There was love there, immense, almost suffocating love, but wrapped in high walls. He knew those walls mirrored the prison he had built for himself since losing Rachel, and deep down, he feared nothing could change that. What Andrew didn't know was that very soon, someone would walk through that door and shake every one of those walls in a way he never expected. The next morning arrived with a clear, cold sky, and the mansion felt quieter than ever. Andrew was in the main hall, reviewing documents on his tablet, when the soft sound of tires crunching gravel signaled the arrival of the service car. Mrs. Whitaker appeared shortly after, adjusting her apron. "Mr. Callahan, she's here." He looked up, closed the tablet, and walked to the door. When he opened it, he found a young woman holding a simple suitcase and a worn-out coat folded over her arm. Harper Ellison. Her skin was very fair, dusted, with faint freckles across her nose and cheeks. Wavy blonde hair fell to her shoulders and swayed slightly in the wind. Her grayish-green eyes met his with a mixture of respect and determination, and there was something about her stance that clearly said she wasn't there to be intimidated. "Mr. Callahan?" Her voice was soft but steady, with a tone that didn't seek approval. "Yes, Harper Ellison, I assume." "That's me. It's a pleasure to meet you." She gave a smile that wasn't rehearsed at all. It was simple, genuine, yet so disarming that Andrew, despite himself, felt a twinge of discomfort, as if a tiny crack had formed in the wall he'd built around himself. "Come in," he said, opening the door wider. Harper stepped through the hall with measured steps, her eyes scanning the inside of the house. The high ceiling, the dark wood floors, the carefully symmetrical flower arrangements. Everything immaculate, but with a chill she sensed immediately. "It's very beautiful here," she commented, perhaps trying to break the silence. "It's functional," Andrew replied, keeping the neutral tone he reserved for strangers. Mrs. Whitaker led her into the living room, where Liam and Grace were sitting on the rug, surrounded by expensive but untouched toys. Harper stopped at the doorway, observing them carefully. Liam had straight blonde hair falling over his forehead and was fiddling with a toy car without much interest. Grace, with golden curls, hugged a teddy bear and stared off into the distance. Harper crouched down to their level. "Hi, Liam." "Hi, Grace. I'm Harper. I'm going to be spending a lot of time with you." The two glanced at her briefly and looked away, as if eye contact were dangerous. Harper didn't flinch. She picked up a toy car and offered it to Liam. For Grace, she chose a soft doll and gently placed it in the girl's arms. "Do you like stories? I know a few you wouldn't even believe." Andrew remained standing, watching the scene with an unreadable expression. He was used to seeing his children withdraw from strangers, but something was different. Grace, still hugging the doll, gave a faint half smile. It was small, but to him, it was almost an event. "They don't interact much," Andrew said, as if offering a warning. Harper looked up at him from where she was still crouched. "Maybe they haven't found someone who speaks their language yet." The phrase hung in the air. Andrew felt an uncomfortable twinge, not irritation, but something harder to admit. Harper hadn't said it with defiance, but with a calm certainty. He didn't reply, just looked away. Mrs. Whitaker informed her that Harper's room was ready. She stood, adjusted her grip on the suitcase, and before leaving the room, looked back at the children. "Tomorrow, we start our adventures." Liam blinked at her, barely noticeably, and Grace hugged the doll a little tighter. When the room returned to silence, Andrew stood still for a few seconds. He couldn't explain it, but something told him that this woman was going to bring about deep changes, not just for his children, but for himself as well. The first week with Harper was marked by an apparently calm routine, but Andrew soon
realized she wasn't the type to follow orders without question.
She was observant, spoke little at first, but when she did, her words carried conviction. And while that trait proved useful in dealing with Liam and Grace, it soon began to stir friction. On a cold and cloudy afternoon, Andrew came down to the living room after finishing a video conference. He found Harper sitting on the floor, Liam in her lap and Grace leaning on her shoulder. She was telling an invented story, full of silly voices and exaggerated gestures. The children, usually so withdrawn, were focused, eyes fixed on her. The scene nearly disarmed him until his eyes fell on the wall clock, and with it, a reminder. Physical therapy was scheduled to begin in 5 minutes. Harper, the session with the physical therapist starts now. You knew that, he said, his tone firmer than he intended. I did, she replied softly, but with no hint of regret. They were exhausted. Today, what they needed was an exercise. It was a little comfort. Andrew narrowed his eyes. Comfort won't make my children walk. Harper lifted her chin. Maybe it's exactly what will. They have expensive devices, timed routines, but not enough of something you can't buy, human warmth. Her response hung in the air, heavy, charged with a silent challenge. Andrew took a step forward, stopping less than a meter from her. I didn't hire you to question my methods. And I didn't take this job just to be another cog. In your schedule, Harper shot back, her eyes locked on his dot for a few seconds. The silence was so thick it felt like the rest of the house had disappeared. Andrew felt a strange mix, irritation at her boldness and an involuntary admiration. For that courage. It was rare for someone to speak to him that way and not back down. 2 days later, the tension repeated itself, but this time even more intensely. Harper had taken Liam and Grace out into the garden, even though the cold wind cut through. The skim. When Andrew found them, Grace was leaning against a tree trunk, trying to take a step without help, while Harper gently supported her, encouraging each movement. You're putting my daughter at risk, he said, quickening his pace. Until he was beside them, Harper stayed calm. She was safe, and she was trying something she's never tried before. Don't you see? She wants to, Andrew. She just needs to believe she can. Andrew scooped Grace into his arms, but he couldn't ignore the brightness in her eyes, a light he hadn't seen in a long time. It was the same one Rachel had whenever. She accepted a new challenge. The thought hit him like a punch, and he had to look away from Harper to compose himself. Later, alone in his office, he found himself replaying the scene in his mind. Something about it unsettled him. The way Harper never backed down, the calm in her voice, the way she seemed to see possibilities where he only saw limits. It was dangerous, because every time they argued, he couldn't help but recall the nearness, the warmth of her presence, and the way those gray-green eyes looked at him, not with submission, but with a strength that could, little by little, break down the walls he'd spent years building. And no matter how much he tried to deny it, part of him already wanted to know what would happen if she kept trying. The next morning, while Andrew was caught up in a series of virtual meetings, upstairs, Harper decided to explore the property more thoroughly. She wanted to get to know every corner of the mansion and, more importantly, find a space that could spark more curiosity in the children. As she walked down a side hallway that lets her used areas, she noticed an old iron door, almost hidden behind a thick curtain of ivy. The latch was rusty but firm. Harper glanced around, stepped into the nearby pantry, and spotted an old bronze key hanging discreetly from a hook. Without thinking twice, she returned to the door, turned the key, and heard the dry click that broke years of abandonment. When the door opened, a fresh scent of earth and flowers filled the air. What lay before her felt like a secret piece of another world, a wide garden surrounded by tall stone walls covered in moss, with tall trees casting shadows and sheltering birdsong. In the center, a small pond reflected the sky, and around it were old rose bushes, weathered wooden benches, and patches of grass dotted with daisies. It was a quiet, hidden refuge, completely invisible to anyone inside the main house. Would you two like to see a special place? She asked, smiling at Liam and Grace, who watched her with curiosity. With small steps and hands entwined with theirs, she led them down a stone path. When they reached the center of the garden, she let them explore. Liam ran his hands along the flower petals, feeling their texture. Grace approached one of the benches and, using it for support, tried to stand. In the days that followed, the garden became a ritual. Harper made up adventure stories that started and ended there. One day, they were explorers hunting for treasure behind the rose bushes. The next, they were sailors crossing imaginary seas where every step was an act of bravery. She used every game to encourage small attempts at balance, hesitant steps, spontaneous laughter. Little by little, the apathy that marked Liam and Grace began to fade. On a particularly clear afternoon, Harper knelt in front of Grace, who was leaning against the wooden bench. "Shall we try one more?" she asked in an encouraging tone. Grace bit her lip, hesitant, then nodded. Harper took her hands and gently helped her take a step. The smile that bloomed on the girl's face lit up the moment. That was when Harper felt a presence behind her. Turning around, she saw Andrew standing at the garden's entrance, arms crossed, but without the cold look he usually wore. He seemed to be taking in the place as if seeing it for the first time in years. "I didn't know you were coming here," he said, his voice low but filled with curiosity. "I thought the kids needed a space where they could feel free," Harper replied, adjusting Grace's coat. "Here, they're not afraid to try." Andrew took a few steps forward, glancing around. "Rachel, my wife, she loved this garden. She used to say it was the only place where she could forget the rest of the world." The name came out heavy, as if it carried too many memories. Harper softened her tone. "I'm sorry." He looked away, but not before she caught the pain hidden in those light eyes. "After she died, I couldn't come in here again. It felt like betraying her memory." Harper hesitated for a second, then stepped closer, keeping her eyes on him. "Maybe it's not betrayal. Maybe it's continuing something she started." Andrew held her gaze for several long seconds, the wind gently moving his hair. There was a mix of gratitude and discomfort in his expression, like she'd touched something he kept locked away. Finally, he broke the moment, looking toward the children. "Keep bringing them here, but let me know next time." As he walked away, Harper remained silent, watching Liam and Grace play. She knew that this garden held more than flowers and memories. It was also the place where an unexpected closeness had begun, one that would, sooner or later, change not only the children's lives, but theirs too. It had been a long day for Andrew. An important meeting had been canceled at the last minute, and he decided to head home early. The Seattle sky was heavy with clouds, and a steady drizzle turned the streets into watery mirrors, reflecting the streetlights. As he stepped into the car, he thought about the children, probably on the living room rug, surrounded by toys, as quiet as always. When he parked in front of the mansion, the sound of rain blended with the soft chime of the automatic gate closing behind him. He took off his coat, hung it in the hall, and began walking through the silent corridors. But then, an unexpected sound made his steps slow. Laughter. Children's laughter. Not loud, but so free and spontaneous it made him stop, following the sound. Andrew stepped into the glass hallway that led to the secret garden. Outside, in the soft evening light filtered through the clouds, he saw Harper. She was kneeling on the slightly damp grass, her hair loosely tied back, a few strands stuck to her skin by the mist. In her hands, she held Liam and Grace. The twins, with short, wobbly steps, were walking toward her. Their faces lit up with smiles he hadn't seen in ages. Harper laughed with them, encouraging each movement. "That's it, Liam. One step at a time." "Grace, look at me. You've got this." Her voice was firm and sweet at the same time, perfectly balancing reassurance and warmth. Andrew stood frozen, watching. Part of him wanted to step through the door and join the moment. Another part, the cautious one, whispered that he shouldn't. He remembered the doctor's words, the uncertainty that had always hovered over his children's future. Seeing this now was like feeling hope and fear all at once, a nearly physical fear of believing and then having his heart shattered. Liam stumbled, but Harper caught him before he fell. "It's okay. That's part of it too," she said, adjusting the boy and placing a soft kiss on his forehead. Grace, excited, took 2 more steps and collapsed into her arms, laughing. Harper hugged her tightly, eyes misty, but her smile never faded. "I knew you could. I always knew." Andrew took a deep breath, stepping back, but the sound of his shoe on the floor gave him away. Harper turned slowly, still on her knees, and the smile on her face faded when she saw him. "Mr. Callahan, I didn't know you were back." He opened the door and stepped in, eyes locked on the children. "What exactly is going on here?" he asked, his voice low but tense. Asterisk. "They were ready, Andrew," Harper replied, not breaking eye contact. "They just needed to try. And they needed someone to believe in them." Andrew frowned, torn between the emotion rising in him and an overprotective instinct. "You don't understand the risk." Harper stood up, still holding the children's hands. "I understand more than you think, but sometimes the risk of not trying is much greater." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the rain tapping the leaves and the soft sound of the children's breath still catching up. Andrew knew this moment would change something, for better or for worse. And no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't decide which possibility scared him more. The cold afternoon wind still carried the damp scent of rain as Harper stepped into the mansion with Liam and Grace, their small hands still warm in hers. Andrew followed close behind, silent, jaw clenched, eyes fixed ahead, as if trying to contain something on the verge of erupting. As soon as the door closed behind them, he stopped in the hall and spoke, not loudly, but with a tone that sliced through the air. "Have you completely lost your mind, Harper?" She turned slowly, still holding Grace, who flinched at the sound of his voice. "They were fine, Andrew. I would never put your children in danger. This isn't just about immediate danger." He stepped forward, his shadow falling over her. "You don't understand what it's like to watch your kids fight for every movement, to hear specialists say they may never walk, and then suddenly think it's all changed, only to have it ripped away from you again. That kind of hope, it destroys you." Harper swallowed hard but didn't step back. "What destroys them, Andrew, is not trying. It's making them believe they can." Today, for the first time, they felt proud of themselves, and that's priceless. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply, as if trying to stay in control. "You're too young to understand what it's like to lose the person you love most and live with that every single day. I've already lost once. I'm not risking it again." She took a step toward him, her gaze locked on his. "And that's exactly why you're holding them back. You're not protecting Liam and Grace. You're protecting yourself from the fear of being hurt again." The silence that followed was suffocating. They stood face to face, so close Andrew could feel the warmth of her breath. The tension between them was almost physical, a charged blend of anger and something far more dangerous, repressed desire that neither dared to name. For a moment, it seemed like one small movement could change the course of everything. But Andrew looked away first. "You're dismissed." The words came out low, but heavy, cold enough to freeze the air between them. Harper blinked, trying to process it. "You can't be serious." "I am." "Pack your things. Mrs. Whitaker will arrange your transport." She inhaled deeply, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. She knelt to hug Liam and Grace, who looked at her, confused and wide-eyed. "You can do anything? Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." Her voice faltered, but she kept a smile on her face, so they wouldn't see her pain. Standing again, she passed Andrew, their shoulders almost brushing. He caught the light scent of her perfume, still laced with rain and something inside. Him screamed to call her back, but pride and fear spoke louder. Harper didn't look back, and the sound of her footsteps echoing down the corridor felt louder than any storm. Harper's absence was felt from the very first morning. The silence that had always reigned in the mansion returned, but this time, it was different. It wasn't just a lack of sound, it was a thick, heavy emptiness that seemed to seep into the hallways, settle into the rooms, and cling to the air. The shy laughter that had started to bloom in recent weeks vanished. The toys, once scattered across the rug, lay untouched in the corners again. Liam and Grace, who had just begun to take tentative steps and express themselves with growing confidence, had slipped back into stillness as if all the progress had been nothing more than a fleeting dream. Andrew noticed it, but refused to face it. He spent longer hours in his office, pretending that work demanded his full attention. But every time he came down for lunch and saw the children sitting silently, pushing food around their plates without enthusiasm, something inside him twisted. One afternoon, Mrs. Whitaker entered the room with a tray of tea and glanced at the children, sitting and staring into space. "They barely touched their lunch, Mr. Callahan," she said quietly, "and they're different, sadder." Andrew kept his eyes on the papers in front of him. "They'll get used to it." The housekeeper let out a heavy sigh. "Maybe. They're not the ones who need to adjust, sir." Her words echoed, even though he tried to silence them. That night, insomnia hit hard. The bed felt too big, too cold. The room, perfectly tidy, had an almost clinical air. He closed his eyes, but Harper's presence crept in, vivid and relentless. The way she smiled when encouraging Grace. The sound of her laughter when Liam accomplished something new. The steady, unwavering gaze when she challenged him. These memories came back with near physical clarity, the tone of her voice, the way her fingers lightly touched his arm to make a point, even the soft scent of her perfume lingering in the air after she walked past. Unable to stay in his room, Andrew got up in the middle of the night and went down to the kitchen, passing the glass door that led to the garden. He paused. A secret garden sat motionless under the pale glow of the moon, but in his mind, he could still hear the children's laughter ringing through the trees and Harper's voice calling out to them. He pressed his hand against the cold glass as if trying to reach back through time and reclaim that moment. Why is it so hard to let her go? The question slipped out before he realized he was speaking aloud. It hung in the air, unanswered. For the first time since Rachel's death, Andrew missed someone who wasn't family. And this absence didn't just ache in him as a father, it cut deep as a man. That realization stayed with him until sunrise. He began to understand that it wasn't just the house that felt empty. He was empty, but to admit that would mean facing something he'd spent years avoiding. And he still didn't know if he had the courage to do it. 2 days after that sleepless night, Andrew woke with a restless weight in his chest that wouldn't let him breathe easily. He had tried to convince himself that Harper's departure was the best decision for everyone, but the truth was, with every passing hour, the emptiness she left behind grew heavier. Not even work or routine could distract him anymore. That morning, as he came down for breakfast, he found Mrs. Whitaker setting the table. As always, she seemed to know more than she said. When she met his gaze, she spoke plainly. "If you're going to do something, Mr. Callahan, do it before it's too late." As she left the kitchen, she placed a folded piece of paper on the counter. On it, a handwritten address. No explanation. Andrew stared at it for a few moments. Then he made his decision. He grabbed his coat, his keys, and left. He drove through damp streets, past neighborhoods that contrasted sharply with the luxury of his mansion. The address led to a low, red brick building with wide windows and a simple, slightly worn sign, Lakeside Community Center. Inside, the sounds of children's voices and laughter filled the air, mingling with the smell of fresh coffee and recently painted paper. Following a narrow hallway, he reached a room bathed in the warm light of late afternoon. And then he saw her. Harper was sitting on the floor, surrounded by a group of children of various ages. She wore jeans and a soft blue long-sleeve shirt, her hair tied back casually with a few loose strands falling over her face. She animatedly told a story, using big gestures, her voice alive with energy, making the kids laugh and mimic her movements. Her smile lit up the room in a way Andrew hadn't seen since. Rachel. He stopped in the doorway, unable to step inside. He just stood there, watching, feeling something break inside him. Not pain, exactly. Realization, a sudden, sharp awareness of everything he had lost by pushing her away. Harper noticed him. She paused just briefly, then finished the story. After a big group hug with the kids, she stood and walked toward him with measured steps. "What are you doing here, Andrew?" Her voice was calm, but guarded. He inhaled deeply, searching for the right words. "I needed to talk to you. I made a mistake, Harper. I was wrong not to believe in you. Wrong to send you away. And since the day you left, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you and about the kids." She crossed her arms, keeping an emotional distance. "You have no idea what your decision did to them. Everything we built, they felt it slip right through their fingers." Andrew stepped closer, shrinking the space between them. "I know, and I'm here because I don't want it to be too late to fix it. Not just for Liam and Grace, but for me too." He reached out and took her hand, an instinct more than a decision. Harper hesitated. She looked down at their fingers, now laced together, then back up at his face. His eyes, once guarded and analytical, now held a raw honesty that made it hard to look away. There was no control, no command, only a silent plea, and something else. Something deeper. Something he had never allowed himself to show. "Andrew." She began, but her voice faltered. He said nothing. He didn't need to. He simply held her hand, as if speaking might shatter the delicate balance of that fragile moment. The hallway felt suspended in time, the background noise of the children fading into a distant hum, and in that silence, it became undeniable. This wasn't just guilt. This wasn't just obligation. This was the beginning of something neither of them could ignore, something that, if they allowed it, would change the course of all their lives. Harper returned to the mansion 2 days after their reunion at the community center. The car pulled up to the iron gates, and she took a deep breath before stepping through. The mansion, once cold and impenetrable to her, now felt different. It wasn't that the walls had changed, it was the way she looked at them now. She returned not to a place of silence and grief, but to a place that now held the possibility of a new beginning. As soon as she entered, Liam and Grace came rushing toward her with quick, eager steps, still unsure but full of energy. Grace clung to her waist, while Liam, almost theatrically, tried to show her he could stand on his own. Harper knelt down to embrace them, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo, and in that moment, she knew. This was exactly where she was meant to be. In the following days, she picked up the routines again, with structure, but also with creativity. Each morning, she brought the twins to the secret garden, bathed in golden light and birdsong. She turned every exercise into an adventure, balancing across smooth stones to cross the river, running to the old bench to save the treasure. Liam laughed when he fell into the grass, and to Andrew's surprise, stood up and tried again. Grace, more focused, kept her eyes locked on the goal. Each step brought a smile of triumph. At first, Andrew observed from afar, arms crossed at the glass door, trying to maintain the posture of a detached overseer. But something shifted. One day, he stepped in to hold Liam's hand. Another, he knelt beside Grace, his hands on her shoulders, whispering encouragement. One more. "You've got this." As he spoke the words, he realized he wasn't just saying them to her. He was saying them to himself. At night, the house felt different too. After the children were asleep, Harper and Andrew found themselves in the kitchen together. She, in sweatpants and her hair messily tied back, stirring tea. He, without the V. Suit, sleeves rolled up, leaning against the counter. They talked about everything. Her childhood in Oregon, baking bread with her mother to sell at the farmer's market. The pressure he faced as a CEO, the weight of impossible decisions, and the isolation that came with power. One night, Andrew spoke about Rachel, openly, for the first time, when she died. "I decided I'd never let anyone close enough to destroy me again." Harper didn't interrupt. She simply held his gaze, letting him unravel at his own pace. When he finished, she replied gently, "Sometimes, not letting anyone in is what destroys us faster." The connection between them deepened in small, quiet ways. A quick touch when passing a plate. Shared laughter when the children did something unexpected. Comfortable silence after an honest conversation. Andrew found himself watching her when she wasn't looking, noticing the curve of her lips when she smiled, the way she tilted her head when listening intently. And then came the night that changed everything. Winter's chill still lingered outside, but the garden was lit by soft string lights hung in the trees. Harper was encouraging Liam and Grace across a stretch of lawn, urging them to take steps on their own. Andrew, standing a few meters back, watched, his heart pounding. And then it happened. Both children crossed the space without support, laughing and collapsing into his arms. He knelt and hugged them, one in each arm, feeling the light, but symbolic weight of their bodies against his chest. When he looked up, he saw Harper standing a few steps away, eyes glistening. There were no words for what that moment meant. Later that night, the house wrapped in its familiar quiet, Harper walked into the kitchen for a glass of water and found Andrew already there, leaning against the counter with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. He handed her one without a word. They sat facing each other, the distant wind the only sound around them. "Today was the best day of my life," Andrew said quietly, but with certainty. "It was their day too," Harper replied, offering a small smile. "No, it was ours." He stood slowly, walked around the table, and stopped in front of her. She felt his presence before she felt his touch. "Harper," he whispered, her name like a secret he was finally ready to speak. She looked up, and in that gaze, there were no longer walls, no titles, no fear. Just a man and a woman stripped of defenses. Andrew leaned down and kissed her. It was slow, deep, and full of everything they hadn't dared say: gratitude, longing, unspoken desire, the aching realization that they had found in each other what they didn't even know they were missing. When they pulled apart, there were no words, only breaths shared in perfect rhythm, as if speaking would break the moment. "This changes everything, Andrew." "I hope it does." Spring had brought mild weather to Seattle, but inside the Callahan mansion, the warmth came from somewhere else entirely. It was Liam and Grace's 6th birthday, and the house, once a place of silence and grief, now pulsed with life. Open windows let in birdsong and the sound of children's laughter. In the hall, colorful balloons floated on long ribbons, and the sweet scent of freshly baked cake drifted through the air. Mingling with the fragrance of fresh flowers Harper had arranged in glass, vases on every table, The once forgotten secret garden had been transformed. Harper and Andrew had planted new rosebush, and a stone path now led to the old wooden bench, a gathering place once more. Strings of lights hung between trees, casting a warm glow even in daylight. A group of children ran freely across the lawn while Liam and Grace, dressed in light, colorful clothes, proudly showed their friends that they could walk and even run a few steps all on their own. Andrew stood at the garden entrance, arms crossed, but not in detachment. His smile was genuine now, absent of hesitation. He watched Harper, at the center of it all, crouched beside Grace, her wavy blonde hair tied back loosely, a few strands dancing in the breeze. He stepped closer, knowing that this moment wasn't just a celebration. It was a quiet confirmation of everything they'd built together. "Have you seen how confident they are?" Harper asked, standing up when she noticed him. "I have, and I'm still amazed," Andrew replied, his voice thick with pride and gratitude. "And I know that's because of you." She smiled softly but glanced away, as if reluctant to take the credit. They just needed someone to believe in them. "And so did I," he said quietly, almost a whisper. Soon, guests gathered around the long table set up in the garden. The cake, decorated with garden details and delicate sugar flowers, was placed at the center. As the group began to sing, Andrew took Liam's hand in one of his, Grace's in the other. Harper stood beside him, completing the circle. And in that moment, it felt as if the past had finally loosened its grip, making room only for the present they were creating. Together, after the cake, the children returned to their games, and Andrew and Harper stepped away to a quieter spot near the pond. The soft light reflecting on the calm water gave the moment a cinematic stillness. Andrew drew in a breath. "You know, I spent years believing that love made me vulnerable, that it made me weak, but today, I realize it's the opposite. Love is what keeps me standing." Harper looked at him, eyes glistening, "and it's what keeps them walking." He smiled at that, a small, knowing smile, and without thinking, slipped an arm around her. Harper let herself lean into him, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling the certainty of that embrace like a promise sealed without words. As the afternoon faded into evening, the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Liam and Grace, tired but happy, sat on the wooden bench beside their parents. Andrew glanced at Harper, then back at the twins. "I think the house is finally full. Not with things, but with what really matters." Harper gently squeezed his hand. "Full of love." The mansion, once defined by its cold stillness, now echoed with tiny footsteps, laughter, and the sound of a new beginning. It wasn't just a family celebrating a birthday. It was a family choosing each other. Not by blood, but by love. And there, in the garden that had once symbolized loss and longing, a quiet certainty was born. Some stories aren't planned, but they still become eternal. Night had fallen over Seattle, but the secret garden still shimmered under the soft glow of the string lights swaying gently in the breeze. The last guests were saying their goodbyes, leaving behind the murmur of quiet conversations and the lingering sweetness of cake in the air. Inside the mansion, the kitchen was full of used dishes and glasses, but no one seemed to care. Harper walked down the hallway, picking up toys Liam and Grace had left scattered across the floor. Andrew stood leaning in the doorway, silently watching her. There was something about the way she moved through the house, as if she had always belonged there, that stirred something deep in him, something that still managed to surprise him. "They asleep?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder. "Out." "Like lights before I even finished the story," Andrew replied with a soft smile. "But I think their favorite part was when you said next year's birthday would be even bigger." Harper chuckled. "Dangerous promises, Andrew." He walked toward her slowly, stopping just a few steps away. "You know, Today wasn't just their birthday. It was the day I realized I never want to go back to that old life, the cold, the emptiness. She looked at him, sensing the sincerity in his voice. And what do you want now? Andrew held her gaze. I want to keep building this with you. Harper stayed quiet for a moment, weighing each word before speaking. Life doesn't often give us second chances, Andrew. But when it does, you'd better not waste it. He stepped closer and took her hand, firm, warm, steady. I don't intend to. Outside, the breeze carried the scent of the newly planted roses, and the mansion itself seemed to breathe with them. The laughter of the children still echoed faintly in the air, a reminder of how far they'd come. Andrew knew there would be challenges ahead. The future wouldn't be perfect, but for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of what was coming. Harper gently squeezed his hand, and together they walked to the wooden bench and sat down side by side. They stayed in silence, simply watching the lights dance on the surface of the lake. No words were needed. What they felt was already clear. In that moment, they understood. The real gift hadn't been the cake, the party, or the songs. It was the certainty that, from now on, they would no longer face life alone. And that love, when chosen day after day, has the power not just to fill a house, but to transform an entire life. So, what did you think of this story? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments so I know how much it moved you. If you enjoyed it, like this video, share it with someone special, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. And before you go, I've already picked out another emotional story that I know will touch your heart even more.